What we're talking about here today is mobile ad targeting, and specifically with these gentlemen that represent mobile ad networks. This morning we talked about some of the... hi, Anna. How about you take that seat down there? Thank you. This morning we talked about some of the kind of incongruence between the supply and demand sides of the equation in mobile advertising, where the supply is represented by mobile ad inventory that's available. And there's a kind of ad demand that is trailing far behind that, and that's causing ad rates to actually go down, thus mitigating some of the monetization opportunities that we're all trying to figure out. So we talked about how one of the things that's going to kind of turn that trend around is lots of ad targeting and finding sources of premium ad inventory, and some of that is going to come from location. So all of these guys are in different ways are trying to do that, are trying to bring location into the picture to boost relevance and thus boost some of the ad performance metrics, thus boost the monetization opportunity. So we're going to talk with each of these gentlemen and lady about what they're all doing in that respect. But first let's start with, for the sake of context, I guess introductions. You know, who you each are, what your roles are at your company, and you know, we only have about a half an hour, so you know, if you could do so in about, just by way of introduction, about 2 minutes about yourself. David, we can start with you.
So I'm David Kurtz. I work for YP, formerly AT&T Interactive. I manage our publisher network. The publisher network itself is sort of search and display, online and mobile. But the part that I'm really focused on and talking about here today is the mobile display side of it, the location-targeted mobile display side of it. That's a network, about 100 million unique smartphone users, doing about 1.6 billion location-targeted ads every month.
Mm-hmm. And let me say before you go, Chi Chow, that's a great idea. I want to fold into the original introduction question also, if you could say about some of the details of the reach of your network and those kind of things to kind of quantify what we're looking at. And then I can skip that as my first question and go to the number 2 one.
Great. My name is Chi Chow Chang, and I work with XAd. Which is a mobile local advertising startup that really focused around delivering relevant ads based on 2 key signals that we get. The first signal obviously is location. Other than that, you know, we wouldn't be here talking about it. And the second signal is search behavior. And we are very keen on understanding what users are looking for and how to map that interest on the map and have that data be of very interest and benefit to advertisers. We work with you know, both search and display publishers. You know, we're connected to all the major exchanges. We work with all the mediation layers. You know, search is more interesting in the sense that we've got a lot of traffic coming from what I call in-app searches. You know, a lot of the top, you know, the 10 apps for local search, directory search, navigational search, you know, is serviced by XAd advertising, and we have some key relationship with some carriers as well. Now, what's really interesting, and that's sort of piggybacking on what David is saying, is, you know, mobile display is really what I think it's the, you know, the interest, and we work with a lot of the major publishers there, but you know, fundamentally, you know, the question is, you know, I'm going to leave that open question for the folks, is how do you drive value and how to drive high CPM and premium dollars when you talk about mobile display? So.
That's great, and also to your point about in-app search, I think that's often forgotten when we talk about search-based mobile advertising. Usually think of within the browser, and that's a game that, you know, Google has dominated for a long time. So the in-app search is still opportune. I think that's often forgotten. So I'd like to get into that as well. Right. David.
Hi, I'm David Stoss. My company is Jywire, and we're a location advertising company as well. We're the leaders in location advertising across any connected device, whether it's a smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop. And we're able to do this because we use 2 main ways of building our network and our footprint of location media. We use, obviously, location-based mobile apps, GPS on a device with a lat long. But we also use public Wi-Fi, people connecting in an airport, a hotel, a Starbucks, for example. And all of that gives us pretty broad reach across a very interesting footprint. We work almost exclusively with large national brands. We work with about 200, 225 major brands that want to advertise on a local level. They work with us because we bring solid reach for them, right? Reach is the important thing for a brand that needs to move the needle. We deliver location.
Makes sense. Let's talk a little bit more about not just the actual geo-targeting method, but also, David, a word used earlier, which I like, was localizing it in some way. So whether it be ad copy or the presence of secondary actions and calls to action. So essentially capturing that user intent in an effective way by building the campaign in a way where the creative actually includes the ability to call the business or generate direction or whatever the desired action happens to be.
Right.
What are you guys doing along the lines of facilitating those secondary actions?
So I think one of the things that we're doing, probably all of us are doing, is just paying attention to it in a way that other people perhaps don't, right? For us, the click on the banner just begins the experience for our advertisers, begins what they're looking at. And I think a lot of things factor into that. But I can tell you that creative matters, and I think everyone here would tell you that. We recently made a change to our ad format on the landing page, and we basically were able to jump high-value clicks from about 18% of clicks on that landing page to about 50% of clicks on that landing page, right? The things like making a phone call. So it really matters how you present information to the user. And to a point that David was making earlier, the calls to action matter a lot as well. We've done a lot of looking at what things work on the banner in order to do that. And the sort of thing that's been floating around our office as a joke is, based on the data, we were saying we should just put "you call today" on every banner ad, because that would drive like the optimal performance, right? But I think those are the kind of things you need to look at and you need to optimize for.
Chicho, you guys do actually a lot of measurement around secondary actions, right?
We do, and there's good news and there's bad news around that. I think the good news is that ultimately advertisers who want to do advertising with XAD or any of these networks, they care about ROI, and the best event that characterizes the ROI is secondary actions. Now, I think the bad news that we all as an industry have to be very aware of is how you measure it. So mobile is it's still in its infancy stages, if you will, from an instrumentation standpoint. A lot of the advertisers that we talk to, they don't have the right tracking set up. They work with third-party, analytics firms or companies.
Well, David's earlier point, they just want to see CPMs because that's what they're used to.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The other thing that I would also add is that what the user does after the click on the banner is really important to understand. Is when the user lands on the landing page, the first thing that you really need to understand is how long does it take for that landing page to actually load. We did some studies internally, and we found out that depending on the device that you're using, depending on the connectivity that you have, it takes somewhere from 1 second to as high as 5 or 10 seconds for that landing page to load. In which case, if the landing page really hasn't loaded and the user just shift back or change the app or the context, that click is a useless click from the advertiser standpoint. So even that piece we're still kind of lagging a little bit on the online side, because page load times on online is much zipier and faster than on mobile phones and smartphones, and we need to pay attention to that.
And just real quickly, we actually looked at that as well, and even with, just to give you some scale, even with a page load that's on an average a second, we see about 40% of people bounce back before they actually get to the end of that landing page load. Right?
Interesting.
And so
I have a tweet question here. We're running a little bit low on time. Back to our earlier conversation about the level of targeting. In terms of a number, if you could put one on it, or in general terms, what percentage of mobile user location do you feel like is accurate down to the store level? So all the location targeting people are saying they're doing, how much of it is actually down to that lat-long store level? Single-digit percentage, more or less?
Well, I think it depends on what network you're looking at, right? I mean, I can tell you what it is on our network, because we've been looking at this, and about 35 to 40% of the locations we get can be used for geofencing. But our network is heavily curated for really high-quality publishers who are sending us good lat-long signals. So that number is probably not going to hold up in the galaxy at large. But I mean, if we just talk about our industry, which is, like I said, heavily curated for local, that's what it is.
Okay. Anything to add? Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, we're 100% lat long.
You are, right?
But we specialize in just saying that's the inventory that we want. And what we typically find is, it's depending on who you're working with, it can be, if you're working with an exchange, maybe 10 to 15% of their inventory really passes that sniff test.
Well, thanks for the specificity. I think that's what we were looking for. I want to close by asking you guys of any examples, anecdotally, from your networks, any advertisers that are, proof points to everything we've been talking about. Any KPIs that you can point to as just kind of supporting evidence for all the stuff we've been talking about? Anyone that wants to jump in?
I can start. something that, I mean, CityGrid's core is on content and adding content to the ads and to the place pages. And we do a lot of research and testing on that. One thing that we did notice is, as I think as you were saying, the creatives are very important. We have a lot of best practices on that. And images are very important on those ad creatives. We did some tests and we saw that we see even 22% increase on CTR just by having relevant images on those ads. That if you don't have any image.
Now, do you mean geographically specific images, Statue of Liberty, or things that are specific to locations, or to the
location, or to the restaurant, or to the business itself,
business.
either a restaurant or whatever it is.
Got it. Very interesting.
So I'll give you one, because this is the one that's really keeping me in this industry right now. Is and it's going to drive us way off the page here into the future. But we ran a pilot with a very mature mobile payment flow on evergreen deals. So we did geofenced evergreen deals and showed them to users in a banner ad context. And we got, depending on the day of the week, we got between 5 and 10% conversion rate. So between 5 and 10% of users who clicked on a deal that they saw inside of a mobile app went through and purchased that deal.
Wow.
That's, to me, is like the future, right?
You guys want to add any examples, and we'll close there?
I'll add one, which is a very interesting example where it illustrates the fact that a lot of times when advertisers come work with you, they're not really sure what exactly is the goal of the campaign, and ultimately they look to you to teach them and to work with them to figure out what that is. So a major hotel chain came work with us, and they wanted to set up a highly hyper-locally targeted campaign to drive reservation calls into their location stores. The campaign was run took 2 weeks. Numbers came back. They were pretty happy with the call rate. But one thing that they learned is that the amount of secondary action engagement on the landing page, which goes beyond the call, like for example, getting maps and directions, hitting the likes and doing a lot of the social interaction, those actions were being tracked. And when they saw those numbers, they all of a sudden realized that the goal for their campaign really shouldn't be driving calls, although that's very interesting for them. The goal for their campaigns is really to measure the secondary actions that ultimately drove the CPMs up high for them. So a lot of people come to you and they say they want this, but if you can show them some data that something else is more valuable to them, they will work with you.
Interesting point. David, you get the last word. Any examples you want to give?
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about how location is important in the content of the creative itself, in the campaign, and that's really what locationizing your brand or your campaign is all about. When we do a lot of A/B testing. Whenever we run a campaign, we look at a locationized version and a non-locationized version of the same campaign. So then we're really isolating down the location variable. About a 3x higher click-through rate on average when you add location into the mix. But depending on what you do with the calls to action, even inside the campaign, you can increase the engagement time, what happens after the click. The example I'll give you real quick, we ran a Best Buy campaign on a national basis. We were highlighting all the different Best Buys that would be near you, and typically we saw about 10% of people were looking at multiple stores or clicking down to an individual store level on a national level. As a sub-part of that campaign, it was a regional campaign, 2 markets, Pittsburgh and Las Vegas, where they were running tech workshops with special class offerings, et cetera, and an 18% engagement rate around that because you're adding even more relevant, more specified data and information around what's happening at those stores in your local market. So as you increase the amount of location relevancy, not only in the initial click, but the engagement that happens after the click goes up.
That's interesting. I wish we had time to dive down on all of those examples, and we should have started there. That's a lot of good stuff, but we'll save that for next time. Please join me in thanking the panel.